The heavy glass door of the private lounge shattered as a chair flew through it, sending diamond-like shards skittering across the marble floor. Minho didn't flinch at the noise. He kept his fingers wrapped around the throat of the man kneeling before him. Rainwater dripped from Minho's tailored lapel, mixing with the dark pool forming on the white floor. 40 women, the man gasped, his voice a wet rattle. 40 of the most powerful bloodlines in Asia were lined up for you. And you burned the syndicate down for her? Minho's grip tightened. His knuckles were white, his signet ring biting into the man's skin. He didn't answer with words. He looked at the small, cheap plastic earring clutched in his other hand, a piece of jewelry that smelled of cheap coffee and industrial soap. He leaned in, his breath cold against the trader's ear. The bloodlines were empty, Minho whispered. She was the only thing that was real. Outside, sirens wailed, but the sound was distant, muffled by the heavy velvet curtains of the penthouse. To understand why the most feared man in Seoul was currently being labeled a terrorist by his own board of directors, you have to look past the silk suits and the billion-dollar contracts. You have to look at the night the rain wouldn't stop, and a girl with a stained apron did something no assassin ever could. 6 months ago the world saw Minho as a machine. He moved through the Sunjin Tower like a ghost in a machine, his eyes never lingering on the beautiful women his father paraded in front of him. Matchmakers from Tokyo to Singapore had failed. He rejected them all without a second glance, his signature on a rejection letter as sharp as a scalpel. Then came the gala at the Obsidian. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and desperation. Minho stood on the balcony, his back to the glitter of the ballroom. His tie felt like a noose. He reached for a glass of water from a passing tray, but his fingers missed. The glass shattered at his feet. "I've got it," a voice said. It wasn't a cultured, soft tone of a debutante. It was rough, hurried. A girl in a black vest and a white button-down with a faint mustard stain on the cuff dropped to her knees. She didn't call for a porter. She began picking up the shards with her bare hands. "Leave it," Minho said, his voice a low vibration. She didn't stop. A sliver of glass sliced her thumb. A single drop of blood hit the floor. She didn't gasp. She didn't look up at him with wide, pleading eyes. She just wiped the blood on her apron and kept moving. "You're bleeding," he remarked. "I'm working," she snapped back. She stood up, the tray of broken glass balanced perfectly on one hand. For the first time she looked him in the eye. Her pupils were blown wide from caffeine, and her hair was escaping a tight bun. She didn't bow. She didn't blush. She turned her back on the heir of the Sunjin syndicate and disappeared into the kitchen. Minho stood frozen. The diamond-encrusted women in the ballroom were watching, their whispers like the buzzing of flies. He ignored them. He walked toward the kitchen doors. "Sir, your father expects you at the head table," his assistant, Kim, whispered, stepping into his path. Minho brushed past him, his eyes fixed on the swinging double doors. He pushed them open to a world of steam, shouting, and the clatter of industrial dishwashers. He saw her at the back, leaning against a stainless steel counter, taping her thumb with duct tape. "What's your name?" he demanded. She didn't drop the tape. "Suji. And you're blocking the pass-through." "Suji," he repeated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of bills, tossing them onto the counter. "Leave. Now." She looked at the money, then back at him. She picked up the bills and handed them back. "I don't take tips for doing my job, and I don't leave mid-shift. Move or I'll have the chef throw you out." Minho's hand stayed extended. No one had ever handed him anything back. His world was built on taking. "You don't know who I am," he said. "I know you're the guy who can't hold a glass of water," she said, stepping around him to grab a stack of dinner plates. As she moved past, a man in a chef's coat stepped out of the walk-in freezer. His face was pale, his eyes darting to the security cameras. He didn't see Suji. He saw the heavy crate he was carrying, and he saw the tripwire he just stepped over. The floor didn't just shake, it groaned. A heavy rack of copper pans began to tilt. "Suji, move." Minho lunged. He didn't grab her waist. He slammed his shoulder into her, sending them both crashing into a stack of flour sacks just as 300 pounds of metal slammed onto the spot where she'd been standing. The kitchen went silent, save for the hiss of a broken steam pipe. Minho looked down. Suji was pinned beneath him, her eyes wide, a streak of white flour across her cheek. "Are you?" he started. The back door of the kitchen kicked open. 3 men in tactical gear, their faces hidden by charcoal masks, stepped inside. They didn't look at the staff. They looked at Minho. "Target acquired," one hissed into a radio. Minho realized then that the accident wasn't an accident. And the girl he'd just saved was now the only witness to a coup. He grabbed Suji's hand, his fingers locking around hers. "Run," he commanded. They didn't head for the ballroom. They headed for the service elevator. As the doors began to slide shut, a bullet sparked off the metal frame. The elevator didn't go up to the penthouse. It shuddered, the lights flickering to a dull emergency red, and began to drop toward the basement levels where the syndicate kept the things they didn't want the sun to see. The basement air tasted of damp concrete and old oil. Minho didn't wait for the doors to fully open. He forced them apart with his hands, the metal groaning under the strain. He pulled Suji out into the dark, her sneakers squeaking on the wet floor. "This way," he whispered, leading her toward the fleet of armored sedans. He reached for his key fob, but the lights of the cars remained dark. He tried the secondary override. Nothing. "They've cut the signal," he muttered. "There's a delivery bike," Suji said, pointing to a battered scooter tucked behind a concrete pillar. "The keys are usually in the visor." She didn't wait for his permission. She ran to the scooter, flipped the visor, and caught the keys mid-air. She hopped on, the engine coughing to life with a wheeze that sounded nothing like the roar of Minho's Ferraris. "Get on," she ordered. Minho looked at the tiny seat, then at the sound of heavy boots echoing in the stairwell. He swung his leg over, his expensive suit trousers straining. He wrapped his arms around her waist. She was thin, but her muscles were like tempered steel. They tore out of the garage just as the first black SUV rounded the corner. Suji didn't head for the main road. She swerved into an alley so narrow the side mirrors scraped the brickwork. If you believe Suji is the only one who can navigate this maze, hit the like button so her courage isn't forgotten, I thought as we leaned into a turn that nearly sent us sliding. They emerged into the neon chaos of Myeongdong. The rain was a curtain of silver, blurring the signs for skin cream and spicy rice cakes. Suji drove like a woman possessed, weaving between delivery trucks and late-night shoppers. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the wind. "The safe house in Gangnam," he replied. "No," she said. "If I know about it, they know about it. We're going to my place." "Your place." Minho's voice rose. "It's a target." "My place doesn't exist on a map," she shot back. She pulled the scooter into a junk-filled courtyard behind a 24-hour laundromat. She led him up a fire escape that creaked with every step, the metal slick with grease. Her apartment was a single room above the dryers. It smelled of detergent and scorched cotton. She locked the door with 4 separate deadbolts and leaned against it, her chest heaving. She looked at him, this man who cost more than the building she lived in, and then she started to laugh. "What?" he demanded, his hands clenched. "You have flour in your eyebrows," she said, pointing. Minho walked to a cracked mirror over a tiny sink. He did. He looked ridiculous. He began to wipe it away, but his hands were shaking. He wasn't scared of the assassins. He was scared of the fact that for the first time in 28 years, he didn't know what was going to happen in the next 10 minutes. Suji walked over, took a damp rag and pushed his hands away. She wiped the flour from his face with steady, practiced movements. Her touch was light, but it felt like a brand. "Why did you save me?" she asked softly. "I don't know," he admitted. 40 women, she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I heard the waitresses talking. You rejected all of them. Why stop for the girl picking up trash?" Minho looked at her reflection in the mirror. "Because they were looking at the chair I sat in. You were the only one who looked at me." The moment was shattered by a low vibration. It wasn't a phone. It was the floor. "The dryers?" he asked. "They're not running," she said, her eyes darting to the floorboards. A red dot appeared on Minho's chest. It danced across his white shirt, settling over his heart. "Get down." He tackled her again, the window exploding inward in a spray of crystalline glass. A high-velocity round punched through the wall where Suji's head had been a second ago. They crawled toward the back door, the smell of cordite filling the small room. "How did they find us?" she gasped. Minho looked at his wrist. His watch. The GPS tracker was embedded in the casing. He ripped it off and threw it toward the window. "Go to the roof," he commanded. "There's a bridge to the next building." They scrambled up the ladder, the rain blinding them. The roof was a forest of vents and satellite dishes. Across the gap, a black-clad figure stood on the adjacent building, a long-range rifle leveled at them. Minho didn't have a weapon. He had a lead pipe he'd grabbed from the stairwell. "Jump," he yelled. Suji leaped across the 4-foot gap, her fingers catching the edge of the brick. Minho followed, his heavy shoes nearly slipping. He pulled her up just as a bullet sparked off the ledge. They ran through a maze of laundry lines, white sheets flapping like ghosts in the wind. Minho grabbed a handful of sheets and threw them over the lines, creating a blinding white corridor. They can't see us, Suji yelled. They don't need to see, Minho said. They just need to spray. As if on cue, a flurry of rounds tore through the fabric. Minho pushed Suji behind a brick chimney. He looked at the distance to the street. It was 3 stories down. There was a dumpster full of cardboard. Trust me? He asked. She looked at the dumpster, then at the shadow of the sniper moving through the sheets. She grabbed his hand. No, she said. But I have a shift tomorrow and I'm not missing it. They jumped. The impact was a dull thud that knocked the wind out of them. Minho scrambled out of the cardboard, his suit in tatters. He pulled Suji out, her face pale but her eyes burning. We need a car, he said. I know a guy, she replied, leading him toward a garage that smelled of illegal exhausts and cheap beer. Inside, a man with grease-stained arms was working on a modified sedan. He looked up, his eyes widening at the sight of Minho. Is that? Don't ask Jean, Suji said. We need the gray ghost. Now. Jean didn't argue. He tossed them a set of keys. Minho took the driver's seat this time. The engine didn't wheeze, it roared. Where to now? Suji asked as they tore out onto the street. The docks, Minho said. My father's second-in-command has a freighter. If I can get to the manifests, I can prove who ordered the hit. It was your father, wasn't it? Suji asked, her voice quiet. Minho didn't blink. He doesn't like loose ends. And he doesn't like being told, no. They reached the docks, the cranes looming like giant skeletons against the gray sky. The freighter, the Gilded Lily, was docked at Pier 9. Security was light, too light. Wait here, Minho said. Fat chance, Suji replied, grabbing a heavy wrench from the glove box. They slipped onto the ship, the metal decks vibrating with the hum of the engines. They found the captain's office. Minho sat at the computer, his fingers flying across the keys. Come on, come on. The screen flickered. A list of transactions appeared. It wasn't a hit on Minho. It was a sale. The Sunjin syndicate wasn't being taken over. It was being sold to a rival family in Shanghai. And Minho was part of the deal. The 40 women weren't brides. They were distractions to keep him from seeing the accounting. He sold you? Suji whispered, reading over his shoulder. A shadow fell across the doorway. Kim, Minho's assistant, stood there. He wasn't holding a tablet anymore. He was holding a silenced Glock. The chairman thought you might be too smart for your own good, Minho, Kim said. But he didn't count on the waitress. Kim shifted his aim toward Suji. If you believe Minho will risk it all to keep her safe, leave a like so this family finally pays for what they've done, I thought as the ship began to pull away from the pier. Minho didn't reach for a gun. He reached for the fire suppression lever on the wall. Suji, hold your breath. He pulled it. A thick cloud of CO2 flooded the room, turning everything to a white blur. A shot rang out, hitting the metal desk. Minho lunged low, sweeping Kim's legs. The gun clattered across the floor. They fought in the dark, the sound of fists hitting flesh the only rhythm. Minho was a trained fighter, but Kim was desperate. Suji, the gun. Suji scrambled on the floor, her fingers brushing the cold metal. She grabbed it, but a heavy boot slammed onto her hand. Drop it, girl, Kim hissed. Minho roared, grabbing Kim from behind and slamming him into the reinforced glass window. The glass cracked. He slammed him again. Tell him, Minho growled. Tell him I'm coming for the crown. He threw Kim through the window. The man hit the water with a splash that was swallowed by the churning wake of the freighter. Minho turned to Suji. She was holding her hand, her face contorted. He knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't be, she said. I've had worse burns from the grill. She looked at the computer screen. What now? We're on a boat to China. No, Minho said, pointing to a small button on the console. We're on a boat that's about to have a very public engine failure in the middle of the harbor. He hit the button. A series of alarms began to blare. We need to go, he said. They jumped into the freezing water just as the freighter's engines seized, the ship drifting into the path of a massive tanker. The chaos would draw every news crew in the city. They washed up on a small rocky beach an hour later. They were shivering, their clothes clinging to them. Minho looked at the city skyline. The Sunjin Tower was the tallest building, a beacon of light. It's over, Suji said. No, Minho said, standing up. It's just beginning. He looked at her, his eyes soft. I can't go back to who I was. And I can't let you go back to that kitchen. I have a life, Minho, she reminded him. I know, he said. But would you consider a promotion? I'm going to need a partner to burn that tower down. Suji looked at her taped thumb, then at the man who had rejected 40 princesses for a girl who smelled like coffee. Does it come with health insurance? She asked. Minho laughed, a real genuine sound that echoed off the rocks. The best. They walked toward the road, their shadows long in the moonlight. 4 months later. The Sunjin Tower was a shell of its former glory. The board had been purged, the chairman was in a private facility in Switzerland, and the stock had plummeted. Minho sat in the CEO's chair, his feet on the mahogany desk. He wasn't wearing a tie. The door opened. Suji walked in, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit her like a second skin. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee from the shop around the corner. The auditors are here, she said, setting a cup in front of him. Let them wait, Minho said, taking a sip. How's the hand? She held it up. The scar was faint, a thin white line across her thumb. It reminds me to hold the glass tighter. He stood up, walking around the desk. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the scar. I told them no to 40 women, he said softly. I know, she said. I should have told them no to 41, he whispered. Because none of them could do what you did. Which was what? She asked. You made me feel, he said. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers. The city outside was loud, chaotic, and beautiful. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who risked everything for something real. If this story broke your heart the way it broke mine, leave a like so I know to tell more stories like this. Because sometimes the best thing you can find in the trash is yourself. The city lights outside the office didn't feel as cold as they used to. Minho watched Suji as she flipped through the legal documents. She didn't look like a waitress anymore, but the way she held her pen, white-knuckled and determined, was the same way she had picked up the broken glass at the Obsidian. The auditors found a discrepancy, she said, not looking up. The Shanghai Group, they didn't just buy the company. They bought the land the tower sits on. Minho stopped mid-sip. The land belongs to the foundation. Not anymore, she countered, sliding a deed across the table. Your father signed it away the night of the gala. While you were in the kitchen with me, he was finishing the paperwork. Minho's jaw tightened. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. He could see the reflection of the office behind him. They were safe, but they were sitting in a fortress built on sand. If he signed it away, we don't own the tower, Minho whispered. Exactly, Suji said. And the eviction notice just arrived. The calm of the office was shattered. Minho felt the ghost of his father's hand on his shoulder. Even from Switzerland, the old man was still pulling the strings. He wants me to crawl back, Minho said. He wants me to beg for the land. Are you going to? Suji asked. She stood up, her navy suit sharp against the mahogany desk. No, Minho said. We're going to buy it back. Every square inch. With what? Suji asked. The accounts are frozen until the audit is over. Minho reached into his pocket and pulled out the small earring he had kept. It was the only thing he had from the night they met. He looked at it, then back at her. I have the Obsidian Vault key, he said. My father kept the physical assets there. Gold, jewels, things that don't show up on a digital audit. If we go back there, his loyalists will kill us, Suji said. They might, Minho agreed. But I'm not losing this tower. And I'm not losing you to a kitchen in China. He grabbed his jacket. Get the gray ghost ready. We're going to the Obsidian. They drove in silence through the neon rain. The city felt different tonight, predatory. Minho knew the matches were being struck and the fire was coming. If you think Minho is a hero for going back to the place it all started, leave a like to show your support, I thought as they pulled into the shadows of the club's entrance. The Obsidian was closed for a private event, but the music was thumping through the walls like a dying heart. Minho led Suji through the service entrance, the same one they had fled 4 months ago. The vault is in the sub-basement, he whispered. Below the dryers. They moved like shadows, avoiding the security cameras they knew were being monitored. They reached the sub-basement, the air thick with the smell of old bleach and dampness. In the corner, behind a stack of rusted washers, was a heavy steel door. It didn't have a handle, only a biometric scanner. Minho stepped up. He pressed his thumb to the pad. Access denied. He removed my prints, Minho hissed. Try mine, Suji said. Yours? Minho laughed. Why would you be in the system? Because when I was a waitress, I used this room to hide from the manager, she said. I found a secondary override on the boiler. It was linked to a guest profile the staff used. She walked to the boiler, her fingers tracing the metal pipes. She pulled a hidden lever and a small dusty keypad popped out. She punched in a code, a date perhaps. The vault door groaned, the heavy bolts sliding back with a sound like a thunderclap. Inside it wasn't just gold. It was a library of blackmail. Folders, hard drives, and photographs of every powerful man in Seoul. This was the true engine of the Sunjin syndicate. This is how he did it, Suji whispered, pulling a folder from the shelf. He didn't build a company. He built a trap. Minho grabbed a heavy leather bag and began shoving the gold bars into it. Take the drives. If we have these, we don't need the land. We own the people who own the land. A light flickered at the top of the stairs. Minho, a voice called out, was familiar. Colt. His father stood there, leaning on a cane, two men in tactical gear flanking him. He wasn't in Switzerland. He was right here. I knew you couldn't stay away from the shine, my boy, the old man said. Minho stepped in front of Suji, his hand reaching for the lead pipe he'd tucked into his waistband. You're supposed to be in Zurich, Minho said. Zurich is boring, his father replied. And I missed the smell of the obsidian. Now, give me the drives and I might let the girl go back to her laundry. Minho looked at Suji. She was holding the drives tight to her chest, her eyes fixed on the tactical guards. The drives stay with us, Minho said. Then you stay in the vault, his father said. He signaled the guards. They didn't reach for guns. They reached for gas canisters. The canisters hit the floor with a metallic clang and thick, white smoke began to billow. Minho knew this gas. It was a paralytic. In minutes they wouldn't be able to move. Suji, the vents. Minho shouted. He grabbed a heavy gold bar and hurled it at the small, grated vent in the ceiling. The metal groaned but held. He threw another. The air was becoming heavy, sweet. Suji stumbled, her knees hitting the cold floor. Minho? I can't. Minho lunged for the vent, his fingers clawing at the edges. He ripped the grating off, his knuckles bleeding. He pulled Suji up, his arms trembling from the weight in the gas. Breathe the air from the duct, he commanded. They huddled against the vent, gasping for the thin stream of fresh air coming from the upper levels. Above them he could hear the guards' boots on the stairs. They're coming down, Suji whispered. Minho looked at the drives in her bag. He looked at the gold. He knew they couldn't take it all. Leave the gold, he said. Take the drives. They're the only thing that matters. But the tower? The tower is glass and steel, Minho said. You're flesh and blood. Go. He pushed her into the ventilation shaft. It was narrow, greasy, but it was their only way out. He followed her, the gas nipping at his heels. They crawled through the dark for what felt like miles, the sound of their breath echoing in the metal tubes. They emerged in the kitchen, the same kitchen where they had met. It was empty, the lights dimmed for the night. The smell of industrial soap was a comfort. We need to get to the server room, Suji said, her voice raspy. If we can upload these drives to the public cloud, he can't stop us. The server room is guarded, Minho reminded her. Not if we create a diversion, she said, looking at the industrial fryers. She turned the gas on high but didn't light the burners. She grabbed a pile of dish towels and soaked them in oil. If this place goes up, the security will scramble to the fire, she said. You're going to burn down the obsidian? Minho asked, a smirk playing on his lips. I told you I had a bad shift here once, she said. She lit a match and dropped it. The explosion wasn't massive, but the fire spread quickly through the grease-coated vents. The alarms began to blare and the sprinkler system hissed to life. They ran for the stairs, the heat at their backs. If you believe Suji is the real mastermind of this operation, drop a like to show her some respect, I thought as they burst into the server room. The server room was a forest of blinking lights and humming fans. Minho shoved a drive into the main port. Come on, upload. The progress bar was a slow, agonizing crawl. 10%. 15%. The door burst open. Kim was there. He looked burned, his face a map of scars from the freighter incident. You don't stay dead, do you? Kim spat. He raised his gun, but Minho was faster. He tackled Kim into a rack of servers, the metal sparking as they hit. They fought in a rain of digital information, the light of the monitors flashing across their faces. Kim was stronger, but Minho was fighting for more than power. He was fighting for the girl at the computer. Finish it, Suji. Minho yelled as Kim's hand closed around his throat. Suji's fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the syndicate's firewalls. 50%. 75%. Kim slammed Minho's head into the floor. The world went gray for a second. Your father said to bring him your head, Kim hissed. He's going to have to settle for a resignation, Minho gasped. He reached out and grabbed a loose power cable from the rack. He jammed it into Kim's shoulder. The current was enough to send Kim into a seizure, the man collapsing in a heap of smoking fabric. Minho crawled to the desk. 99%. 100%. Upload complete. The screens in the room turned white. Every terminal in the city, every news station, and every police station began receiving the files. The secret history of the Sunjin Syndicate was now public property. It's done, Suji said, her face illuminated by the white light. Minho stood up, leaning on the desk. He looked at the chaos they had created. We have to go, he said. The police will be here in minutes. They fled through the roof, the rain washing the soot from their faces. Below them, the obsidian was a hive of sirens and blue lights. They watched from the shadow of a water tower as the tactical units arrested his father and the remaining elders. The trap had been sprung, and the hunter was now the prey. What now? Suji asked. Minho looked at the Sunjin Tower in the distance. It was dark, but the moon was reflecting off the glass. Now, he said, taking her hand, we go to that kitchen in China. Wait, really? She asked, surprised. No, he laughed. We're going to my apartment. I have some very expensive coffee that needs to be made by an expert. The server room was a forest of blinking lights and humming fans. Minho shoved a drive into the main port. Come on, upload. The progress bar was a slow, agonizing crawl. 10%. 15%. The door burst open. Kim was there. He looked burned, his face a map of scars from the freighter incident. You don't stay dead, do you? Kim spat. He raised his gun, but Minho was faster. He tackled Kim into a rack of servers, the metal sparking as they hit. They fought in a rain of digital information, the light of the monitors flashing across their faces. Kim was stronger, but Minho was fighting for more than power. He was fighting for the girl at the computer. Finish it, Suji. Minho yelled as Kim's hand closed around his throat. Suji's fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the syndicate's firewalls. 50%. 75%. Kim slammed Minho's head into the floor. The world went gray for a second. Your father said to bring him your head, Kim hissed. He's going to have to settle for a resignation, Minho gasped. He reached out and grabbed a loose power cable from the rack. He jammed it into Kim's shoulder. The current was enough to send Kim into a seizure, the man collapsing in a heap of smoking fabric. Minho crawled to the desk. 99%. 100%. Upload complete. The screens in the room turned white. Every terminal in the city, every news station, and every police station began receiving the files. The secret history of the Sunjin Syndicate was now public property. It's done, Suji said, her face illuminated by the white light. Minho stood up, leaning on the desk. He looked at the chaos they had created. We have to go, he said. The police will be here in minutes. They fled through the roof, the rain washing the soot from their faces. Below them, the obsidian was a hive of sirens and blue lights. They watched from the shadow of a water tower as the tactical units arrested his father and the remaining elders. The trap had been sprung, and the hunter was now the prey. What now? Suji asked. Minho looked at the Sunjin Tower in the distance. It was dark, but the moon was reflecting off the glass. Now, he said, taking her hand, we go to that kitchen in China. Wait, really? She asked, surprised. No, he laughed. We're going to my apartment. I have some very expensive coffee that needs to be made by an expert. 6 months later. The Sunjin Tower had been renamed. It was now the Sujimin Foundation. The lobby was no longer a cold fortress of glass. It was filled with plants and a small cafe where the coffee was free for anyone looking for a job. Minho stood at the window of his office. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He was the chairman of a non-profit that specialized in data protection and employee rights. The door opened. Suji walked in wearing a casual sweater and jeans. She was holding a tray with 2 cups. The board meeting starts in 5 minutes, she said. Let them wait, Minho said. He walked to her, taking a cup. He looked at her hand. The scar was still there, a badge of honor. I told them no to 40 women, he said softly. I know, she smiled. I'm glad I stopped for the 41st, he whispered. He leaned in, the kiss tasting of coffee in the future. The city outside was loud, chaotic, and finally their own. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who risked everything for something real. If this story broke your heart the way it broke mine, leave a like so I know to tell more stories like this.